Hello, music people. Welcome to the next installment of my video series on creating a lead sheet of an original piece of music. So we're working on making a lead sheet of this simple song that I wrote called A Chill Song. So far we've got our melody, we've got our lyrics, and now we're going to add chords. And this is potentially a big topic. I'm probably going to spend 2 videos on it, and I'm also going to refer you to 2 other videos that I've done about chords and chord progressions and how to go about adding chords to a melody. And very briefly, across those 2 videos, I recommended using 4 different criteria to consider when adding chords to a melody, at least when you're first starting and learning how to do this. Number 1, consider the pitches of the melody. Right? In most cases, most of the notes of your melody are going to be the notes of the chord that you're using to accompany the melody at that time. Okay? So that's the first criteria, the pitches of the melody. Second, consider where the pitches of the melody fall in relation to the strong and weak beats of the bar. Okay? 3, consider the duration of the pitches of the melody. And number 4, you should consider the conventional uses of chords and chord progressions. There's certain conventions around what chords tend to be used in different situations. So, you should consider that as well. And when I go through putting chords to the melody of this song, you're going to see, a bunch of those principles at work. So let's hop right in. I'm going to pull up MuseScore. And by the way, you can do all of this in Logic as well, or other DAWs. There's other software writing programs. And I just like MuseScore because it's free and it's easy to use. And that's what I'm doing in this video. But you can, apply the different processes in whatever software program you like. So here I've got my song, I've got my melody, and I've got my lyrics written underneath. And to start putting the chords in, you basically start in the same way as we did when we did the lyrics. We select the first note. Again, it makes sense to just start at the beginning, click add at the top, click text, and then click chord symbol. Again, there is a keyboard shortcut associated with doing that you can use if you want to. And then there's a cursor that shows up at the top. And that is the place where chord symbols go on a lead sheet. And you just start typing them in just like you would start typing in lyrics. And basically, once you've finished typing in the chord symbol, you press space, and this program actually gives you a little hint about what the G chord is that you're doing. So that's kind of a cool feature. And so I know that G starts at is the first chord I play. And then I know that E minor is the next chord that I play. And to E minor, the chord symbol for that is E, and then a lowercase m. E, M-I-N is also acceptable. I'm just going to do E with the lowercase m. That's totally fine. That's E minor. And I just kind of keep pressing space until I get to the part where I want. You'll want to make sure that the chord symbols you're writing are right on top of the note and right on the top of the beat where you want the chord to be played. You want to be very specific there because you are giving instructions to people how to play your song, and they haven't necessarily heard your song before. That's the point. That's the whole point of a lead sheet, is to be able to, hand someone a lead sheet. They've never heard your song before, but if they know how to if they know how to read a melodic line, and if they know how to read chord symbols, they will be able to play it. So you want to be as accurate as you can. So I know that D goes there. And you get a little preview, and you can kind of keep going all the way to the end of the song, and eventually you will end up with something that looks like this. Now, when I wrote this song, I already knew what the chords were going to be, because I kind of came up with the chords and the melody at the same time. I composed this at the piano, And so adding chords was not such a big deal for me. And so if you write music that way while at the piano or while you're at the guitar, that might be the same thing for you. But if you're a vocalist and maybe you come up with the melody first and you kind of need to figure out or decide on the chords later, and if that's you, then that's totally fine. Then you kind of have to go through a bit more of a theoretical exercise to figure out what you want to do. So let's take a look at these few measures here as an example of the process that you would go through when you are looking at a melody and deciding which chords to place with it. So you might decide, first of all, that during the verse, you might think, okay, I think during the verse, I'd like to have the chords change every 2 beats. And it's very typical to have chords changing, at that rate in popular music. And it's common to have the chords changing right on the downbeats. And if they're changing every 2 beats, then that means that there's a new chord on beat 1 and there's a new chord on beat 3. So let's look at the first half of measure 3. So we first of all, we know that we're in the key of G. And what we might do is we might kind of look at this measure as a whole and think, okay, we've got 1, 2, 3 G's and we've got 3 E's. Okay, well, then you kind of think to yourself, well, which chords, which diatonic chords in the key of G contain those 2 notes? E and G. Well, we know for sure that that the G chord contains G. We know that the C chord contains E and G, and we know that E minor contains E and G. But we also know that we're in the key of G, and so the G chord is probably going to be, kind of a predominant chord that we'll want to use, right? And we might also bear in mind certain, chord progressions and certain practices. And, typically when you start this, we're starting a new phrase here, a new musical idea, sort of a new musical sentence. Often it can make sense to start a new musical sentence with the tonic chord. And so you could choose to put G here, even though E isn't really part of the G chord. You could do G. And by the way, I've got my piano in front of me too. So you can sit at a piano, you can sit at a guitar, strum some basic chords and hear how it sounds and see what you like. The other thing that's common with how chords are used is this. I kind of consider this the verse of the song, and very often in a verse there will be maybe like a 4-bar or an 8-bar, or even less. In this case, it's actually a 2-bar chord pattern that goes through most, if not all, of the verse. So that's something else to consider. You might want to write a song and write chords that follow that convention, right? So the melody goes like this: It came to me when I rolled out of bed, right? So you could think, okay, G, let's see. So you play a G chord. It came to me when that sounds all right. We'll try E minor. It came to me when I, something like that. It's like, well, you might think, I kind of want this to be a happy song. Usually minor chords sound a little bit sad or a little bit serious. I want this to be, it's called a chill song, right? So you might lean more toward major. What about using the C chord? It came to me when I rolled out of bed. That's often how things will happen, is as you're singing, you're kind of thinking chords and you're playing chords and playing along. So, that that could actually be an option. And so let's see what happens if we write that out. So I select that note, I go add chord symbol. C actually would work all the way through this. You could decide to do that because all of these notes are part of C. The E and the G are both notes that are contained in the C chord. And you might think, well, I'd like to kind of change it up at the end here. Here I've got a D note, and so maybe you want to put a D chord here at the end. So add chord there. There's likely better ways of doing this with keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that. But just for your benefit, I'm kind of just going to take my time a little bit here. So you could harmonize those two bars in the way that I just did, in a very simple kind of way. It came to me when I rolled out of bed. Okay, so that does work. But you might also try different things. You might bear in mind what I said earlier, that it might be nice to kind of have a 2-bar chord progression that kind of repeats throughout the verse, and you're singing the melody on top. And so you think, okay, I've got 2 bars here, I've got 2 bars here. You've got all these 2-bar ideas. This is actually a 3-bar idea, so you might want to do something different here. But you've got these 3 2-bar ideas, and you might think, well, those are pretty similar. You kind of look at the melody, and you might say, yeah, gee, that melody those melodies are similar. Those 2-bar phrase ideas are similar, so maybe I want to do the same chords. So what chord combination would work for all 3 of those similar musical ideas? And you might come up with what I came up with: G, E minor, C, and D, just repeating that all the way through. And there's lots of other possibilities that you could try. I've got a song stuck in my head, right? Another one you could do is E minor, C, G, and D. That works too in this case because of the notes. I'm gonna write that in, and I'll show you how that works. Sorry, I'm doing this a little bit in a clumsy way, but I will get there. There we go. So look how this works. It works, right? E minor and C. These notes of the melody are in the chords. G works here, D works here. So that could be, another option that you decide to do. You can play it, see how you like it, and then make a decision. I've got a song stuck in my head. I actually really like that. Yeah. So so I might change my mind about the chords in this song. And if you're able to apply your theoretical knowledge to this process of writing chords, rewriting chords, trying different things, seeing what works, then you could end up with a really great song. Here's what I ended up, deciding to do. So I did G, E minor, C, D for the first, sort of 3 phrases, 3 2-bar phrases of the song. Of the verse, and then the last part of the verse leading into the chorus, I kind of changed it up. I thought, okay, I'll introduce kind of some new chord ideas. I've got E minor here, and that works because I've got G and E in the melody. Those are both chord tones. Then I've got B minor here, and that works because I've got D and B in the melody. Those are both part of B minor. Here I've got a brief non-chord tone. G is not part of the B minor chord, but it works here because it is just a note that's short duration. It comes on a weak beat. It comes on an 8th note beat, and it works well because it's anticipating the next chord, which is C, and G is in the C chord, so it works well there too. Now, I want to draw your attention to this chord, which is a bit of an unconventional chord, but I wanted to put it in to show you just first of all an example of a non-conventional chord and how you write it out. You write out a diminished chord on a lead sheet, most often like this. It's a C sharp diminished chord, so you would write C sharp D I M. All right, and the reason it works there, again, here's some other chord change conventions that you can think about here. You've got B, and what ends up happening is the bass ends up kind of doing this chromatic walk up from B up to C, C sharp diminished, and then D. It walks up to D and then resolves on the G at the start of the chorus. So it works pretty well, I think. Okay, I threw in a D sus4 chord there too, but I just wrote D to keep it simple. Now, technically what we have here in the melody is we've got a G, and we have a B, and we have an A, and I'm harmonizing those notes with C sharp diminished. And that might seem like an interesting choice. What's kind of going on there? Well, we've got G, which is part of C diminished chord, C sharp diminished, and that is being held for a quarter note. We've got A, let me talk about A for a minute. That is anticipating the D chord, because A is part of the D chord and it's only held for an eighth note, so that's not such a big deal. But take a look at this B note here. B is not part of C sharp diminished, but does it work with C sharp diminished? You can try it yourself. You can sit down at the piano or at the guitar. You can play C sharp diminished chord, which is C sharp, E, G, and then you can play B at the same time and see if it sounds okay. And if it does, for that moment in the song, then it works and it's fine. If you're happy with that as a creative choice, then you can leave that note there and leave C sharp diminished labeled in the way that it is. Right? That's kind of the movement that happens. I did that D sus4 again. It's such a habit of mine. All right. Hey, it works. To put a B on top of C sharp diminished works just fine. Now, those of you who are astute students of theory will notice, now wait a minute here, if you take a C sharp diminished chord and you put a B on top of it, what you actually get is you get a C sharp half diminished 7. That chord is also known as C sharp minor 7 flat 5. That's technically what that chord is. So you have a choice. You have a choice on the lead sheet, and I have to say there's not really an incorrect choice. You can do either one. You can either keep C sharp diminished there and just kind of treat that B note as a non-chord tone because it works with it and it's fine, and maybe you think, yeah, I'm just going to kind of keep it a simple lead sheet and not get into any crazy 7 chords. I'll just keep it C sharp diminished. It's fine. Or you might think, no, I want people, for that entire part of the bar, not just when the B is played, I want for those entire 2 beats of the bar, I want everybody to be playing a C sharp half diminished 7 chord the whole time. Or C sharp minor 7 flat 5. C sharp minor 7 flat 5 is actually the way that you will want to express that chord on a lead sheet. That is, the chord symbol. There's not really a great chord symbol for half diminished 7. Technically what it is in sort of Roman numeral labeling world is a tiny little circle with a tiny little line through it, and that's just really hard to see on a lead sheet. So it's much more preferable, if you're wanting to be a real stickler for labeling things as, minor 7s and stuff, minor 7 flat 5 as you do M7 flat 5, like that. And MuseScore knows all the chords. You type in a chord and it kind of gives you a preview. So you could label it like that. But again, there's no wrong answer here. If you want to do C sharp minor 7 flat 5, that's fine. If you want to just keep it simple and keep it C sharp diminished, that's okay too. Okay. Now, I touched on something else earlier. Um, I have chosen, and again, there's not really a right or wrong always here. Um, I've chosen to just leave this as a D chord for that whole measure. Now, out of habit, because what I like to do is sometimes when I'm holding the 5 chord, because that's the 5 chord in this song. D is the 5 chord when you're in the key of G. I just I like the idea of doing, a sus4 and then the major chord. So D sus4 maybe for 2 beats, and then just the D for the last 2 beats. Now, I might say to myself, I'm not super fussy if people decide to do that or not. They might make an artistic choice in the moment to do D sus4. If they do, great. If not, doesn't really matter. Um, so then you might just want to leave it as D, and then again, leave it to the performer's discretion what they want to do. But if you say instead, no, like I really want to make sure that the performers play a D sus4 there, then you can write that in. So I'll show you how you would do that. D sus4. All right, so you could add that in if that was really important to you. All right. But I do want to make a little bit of a caution here. And it's the same caution I gave when I was talking about melody writing. When I was talking about melody writing, I was encouraging you to avoid overcomposing. And I would say the same thing when you're writing chords. Sometimes people will write lead sheets and they will be real sticklers about making sure that every chord they write totally reflects what the melody is, and they're not allowing for the possibility of any non-chord tones. Okay, I would discourage that, because in practice, especially with popular music based songs, really, if someone's strumming a guitar, playing keyboard, playing bass, they're not gonna you're if they're changing chords every beat or every eighth note because you've written in a million chords just to make sure there are no non-chord tones in your song, it's not even going to sound good. It's going to be tiring to play and to read and stuff. So that's my suggestion, best to just keep it simple and only put in a chord change or like specific chords when like it's really really necessary. Like, I absolutely want the musicians to play a D sus4 followed by D every single time before the chorus. If that's what you want, then okay, you can write that in. But yeah, I mean, for example, um, someone might look at this G here and say, well, B minor is not part of G, so I'm going to write a quick uh, G over B chord here on this eighth note B. That would be overdoing it. That's overkill. You don't need to do that, right? So that's one thing I want to say. And then the other thing you can kind of take note of in this song is, I've written some slash chords here. So this means that you've got a G chord with a B in the bass. Here you've got a C chord with a D in the bass, and I really love that chord, and it's a chord that is that's used often in pop music. I hear it a lot in soul music, and it's one of the reasons why I actually don't really like to think of slash chords as inversions, because there are some kinds of slash chords that cannot be described as an inversion, and C over D is an example of that. That's not an inversion. That is a chord that uses a bass note that's not in the chord. So I like the term slash chord because it covers everything. All right. And then the only other thing that you could, think about and decide is whether you want to use just triads as I've done here, or if you want to spice things up with some seven chords, right? So instead of it just being G, E minor, C, and D, one way that you could add some color to that chord progression if you wanted is you could make it an E minor 7. The way it's written, this part here, the way it's written, it sounds like this. I like to sing it when no one's around, right? If you make it a E minor 7 instead, right? I like to sing it when no one's around. It's, it's a subtle difference, but it's there. So if you want to write E minor 7 there, then you can. Again, there's not really a right or wrong there. You might decide, hey, if the performer wants to play it in E minor 7 instead of E minor, not the end of the world. Then you could just keep it E minor with the understanding that performers may choose to use their discretion. Okay. So hopefully that all makes sense. I'm going to do another video that's that's going to help you if you play piano and play guitar and you've come up with a bunch of chords, but you're actually not sure what the chords are. And I'm going to tell you how you can figure out what those chords are so that you can write them on your lead sheet. That's what's coming up. So stay tuned.